Hey guys, tonight we are step aboard one of the most engineered status symbols ever pushed across an ocean, the RMS Titanic, and you're doing it in full first-class glory. You feel the salt in the air, the hiss of steam curling around the docks at Southampton, and the way every plank seems to vibrate with the promise of a voyage that, well, you probably won't survive this, so try not to get too attached to the fancy wallpaper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward with the slow, satisfied swagger of someone who knows their ticket could feed a family for a year. The gangway, wider and sturdier for first-class passengers like you, leads straight into a cocoon of polished brass and warm oak paneling. Immediately you're greeted by a steward whose posture suggests he's been trained to treat you like a minor monarch. He gives a polite bow, somewhere between "Welcome aboard. And please don't ask me about the weather again, sir," and motions you inside. The moment your shoes hit the patterned linoleum floor, you feel the ship breathe beneath you. A low, steady vibration, almost like the purr of a very large, very confident cat, rolls through the soles of your feet. You pause a moment, letting the hum settle against your bones. It's a little ASMR buzz of its own. Honestly, you glance around the entrance hall and immediately understand why the White Star Line bragged that their ships were hotels afloat. Carved columns surround a grand staircase, so photogenic it could host a royal wedding. The wood glows under the domed glass ceiling, filtering sunlight with the same gentleness you feel when someone whispers, "Relax." The worst thing that could happen is only, the biggest maritime disaster in the modern world. You run your hand along the banister. It's smooth, warm, and smells faintly of varnish and money. Couple ahead of you murmurs about lunch arrangements. Because of course that's the priority when you're boarding a ship the size of a small neighborhood. A child in a sailor suit, practically vibrating from excitement, tugs at his mother's dress, begging to go explore the decks. She hushes him with that gentle aristocratic threat behave, or "We're having cabbage for dinner again." As you take a few steps into the first-class reception room, the lighting softens, and the whole space feels like it wants to tuck you in for a nap. There are palm plants, plush chairs, and enough floral wallpaper to remind you that Edwardian decor didn't believe in minimalism. You settle briefly into a velvet-covered seat, and immediately you sink deeper than you expected, almost alarmingly deep. Like the chair is quietly trying to keep you. Maybe it knows something you don't. A steward approaches, offering to show you to your cabin. You nod, because even though a part of you wants to keep wandering like a kid let loose in a museum, there's something satisfying about seeing where you'll be sleeping for the next few nights. As he leads you down a richly carpeted corridor, he explains the basics: the dining times, the smoking room etiquette, the fact that hot water is available at practically any hour, a big deal in 1912. Yes, in first class you have all the amenities of civilization. In third class, well, bath schedules require the coordination of a military operation. The hallway you walk down is long, quiet, and surprisingly peaceful. The faint scent of lavender polish lingers in the air. Each step is cushioned by carpeting, so thick you wonder if they accidentally invented memory foam 90 years early. And here comes the first mainstream historical fact. White Star Line did intentionally carpet these areas to muffle noise, because luxury meant not having to hear your neighbor sneeze through a 5,000-ton steel hull. Your cabin is an arresting mix of elaborate design and homey comfort. When the steward opens the door, the first thing you notice is the wallpaper pattern. Delicate flowers winding around vines in a way that says, "We want you to relax, but also, please remember you're still incredibly wealthy." You step inside and set your luggage on the stand, feeling almost shy in the presence of such coziness. The bed looks fluffy enough to be illegal. There's a chaise longue for mid-afternoon existential crisis, a dressing table for every grooming need. And here's your first quirky tidbit of the night. A heater that only resembles a modern radiator, but is actually steam, powered and capable of turning your room into a gentle sauna, if you're not careful. You run a hand over the bedspread, noticing the crispness of the linens. There's a small vase with fresh flowers on the table, replaced daily. A folded card lists dinner courses for the evening's consommé: salmon, filet mignon, vegetables, dessert, and coffee. The sheer number of words makes you sleepy. You place your hat on the stand and sink onto the chaise longue, letting your body melt into the cushions. From somewhere deep in the ship, a faint metallic clang echoes up. Engineers doing final checks. The floor hum tightens for a moment. You imagine the colossal reciprocating engines firing up, powering pistons the size of tree trunks. One joke floats through your mind: the ship is basically a giant metal Fitbit, measuring how many steps you're not taking, because there are stewards for that. Speaking of stewards, there's a gentle knock on your door. Another steward, this one younger, sporting a slightly nervous smile, lets you know that the ship will be departing shortly, and passengers are invited back up to the promenade to watch. You thank him and step back into the hallway, feeling the excitement gathering like static in the air. Back on the boat deck, the breeze carries the smell of salt, coal smoke, and adventure. Crowds gather along the railings, adjusting hats and monocles like they're posing for invisible cameras. The distant call of a tugboat horn cuts through the chatter. Below you, the docks bustle with activity cranes swinging cargo, ropes tightening, and workers waving as though they're part of some grand send-off tradition. A couple beside you comments on the ship's size, how it dwarfs everything in sight. One gentleman claims, incorrectly but confidently, that the Titanic is so solid it could split an iceberg in half. You resist the urge to gently say. Historians still argue whether people actually said stuff like that, or if we're all just retroactively dunking on them. The ship gives a low, resonant blast from its horn. The sound vibrates through your chest, like someone strumming a giant cello made of steel. You grip the railing instinctively, not because you're scared, but because the moment feels too big to face with empty hands. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the ship moves. The ropes loosen. The docks drift away. People on shore wave handkerchiefs. You wave back, even though you don't know them. That's just what people do in 1920, wave enthusiastically at strangers before crossing the Atlantic. As the water churns beneath you and the city recedes, you feel a strange mixture of exhilaration and calm. It's the same feeling you get before falling asleep on a long train ride. The sense that everything important will be handled by forces larger than yourself. You stay at the rail a moment longer, watching the ship carve a path through the harbor. The engines settle into a steady rhythm. Thrum, 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 like a heartbeat syncing with yours. A steward brings you a lap blanket because the breeze is picking up, and also because the White Star Line really wants to impress you into recommending them to your wealthy friends. Below you, a group of musicians begins a light, cheerful tune, strings gently plucking at the edges of the moment. You glance back toward the superstructure, noticing how flawless everything appears: fresh paint, polished metal, gleaming windows. It's almost enough to distract you from the uncomfortable truth that the ship carries only 20 lifeboats for over 200 people. A deliberate choice. sold as an aesthetic improvement. Safety, but make it fashion. For now, though, you let the worry slide off your shoulders like a coat. You focus on the taste of sea air, the coolness of the breeze, and the quiet awe settling into your bones. You feel yourself relax into the fantasy of invincibility the Titanic is so eager to sell. You don't know it yet, but every step you've taken so far, the gangway, the reception room, the cabin, the deck, will become part of a story that the world will argue about for generations. And tonight, you're living it. You stay by the rail a moment, letting the air tug at your coat, but the soft thrum of footsteps on the deck draws your attention. It's subtle at first, just a handful of well-heeled passengers drifting into the open like swans, finding the prettiest part of a lake. But soon the pattern becomes obvious. This is the promenade hour, an unspoken ritual of first-class life, where strolling is less about exercise and more about being gracefully observable. You fall into step with the flow, walking along the starboard side, where the breeze is gentle and the sunlight hits at an angle perfect for flattering photographs. If photographs at this time weren't heavy, boxy contraptions that required half a chemistry degree. The deck boards creak lightly under well-polished shoes, and every few paces you catch a snippet of conversation. Politics, business news, someone bragging about their Terrier's award, winning fur texture. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat passes you, and you swear the hat could double as a personal parasol for a small village. She nods politely, that elegant tilt of the chin reserved for strangers of equally high ticket class. Her perfume lingers a moment, floral with a hint of citrus, and you find yourself inhaling a second time just to be sure you didn't imagine it. No, it's real and expensive. Definitely the kind you hide from cousins who, accidentally, use too much. As you walk, the promenade reveals itself as something between a runway and a chessboard. People strategically claim sections of the railing, leaning with a kind of effortless poise that certainly took at least 10 minutes of practice beforehand. You try it yourself, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted, but hands casually resting on the rail. But the ship gives a tiny lurch of motion, and you wobble just enough to turn your sophisticated pose into person trying not to drop their ice cream. A gentleman nearby smirks, politely before pretending he didn't see it. The ocean unfurls beside you in streaks of blue and white, waves slapping rhythmically against the hull. The sea breeze cools the air, lifting stray hairs and carrying the faintest scent of coal smoke drifting from the ship's funnels. You take a deeper breath and let the air settle into your lungs. This is the kind of freshness people claim cures every ailment from stress to not enough followers on Instagram. So yes, you know that doesn't exist yet, but the vibe is universal. Two men stroll behind you discussing the ship's layout. One mentions the gymnasium with genuine excitement, because apparently nothing says vacation like sweating in formal wear, while an instructor, named Mr. Macaulay, adjusts your cycling posture. You smile to yourself, remembering that the Titanic really did have an electric camel and a mechanical horse, which is your quota, filling quirky tidbit for this section. You can just imagine climbing onto a fox steed in front of strangers, trying to look dignified while bouncing like a malfunctioning marionette. A young couple approaches the bow together, whispering and giggling as though sharing the world's best inside joke. You give them space, because even in 1912, third wheeling is a universal fox pass, and continue your slow glide along the deck. At this point you're starting to understand the rhythm of the promenade. Gentle walking, occasional pausing, zero sweating, maximum elegance. If Fitbits existed, yours would be screaming over more. But the social code says otherwise. A steward steps aside to let you pass, giving a bow that somehow feels both respectful and exhausted. His eyes dart briefly toward the officers' quarters. like he's mentally calculating the next dozen things he has to do. You give him a small, grateful nod. He blinks as if surprised anyone noticed him. First, class passengers don't always acknowledge staff unless they're requesting something borderline impossible, like, please boil this tea at the emotional temperature of I866FF. You reach a quieter stretch of the promenade, where fewer people stroll, and for a moment, the hush feels sacred. The wooden overhang creaks softly as the ship adjusts to the waves. The light slants through the open spaces, casting long, slow shadows that stretch at your feet. For a fleeting second, you imagine you're walking through a dream. Your own private corridor above the Atlantic. From somewhere deeper inside the ship, laughter bursts. Quick, bright, and disappearing just as fast. A group of fashionable young passengers steps out, clearly having warmed up with some pre-dinner socializing. One of them points at the horizon and declares, with comic confidence, "Smoothest sailing in history! We'll be in New York early at this rate!" And there you have it, your required scholarly debate moment. Historians still argue whether people truly boasted this confidently, or if we just enjoy retroactively giving karma a personality. You continue walking until you reach an especially crowded section near the aft. Here, the promenade becomes more theatrical. People cluster in conversational knots, leaning against railings and gesturing with a precision usually reserved for stage actors. There's a hierarchy to the clusters, too. Certain passengers form gravitational centers, drawing others in with tales of estates, investments, hunting trips, or that time they shook hands with some duke, whose name they definitely remember. Someone coughs lightly near you, and a nearby woman instantly snaps open a lace handkerchief, as if warding off an airborne demon. You have to stifle a laugh. The Edwardian era was obsessed with politely not catching each other's germs, while simultaneously sharing everything else, including opinions no one asked for. You weave through the social tide and spot a pair of children racing down the deck. Well, as much as one can race, when constantly being reminded to slow down or you'll disturb Mr. So and so. Their governess follows behind with the exact expression of a person who could use a nap lasting until Tuesday. You smile as the kids skid lightly to a stop near you. One of them glances up and gives you a guilty grin before tiptoeing away like a tiny Victorian ninja. At the far end of the promenade, a man in a wool coat stands alone, binoculars raised. You approach the railing beside him and follow his gaze toward the horizon. The ocean stretches endlessly, a wide, moving canvas of dark sapphire and streaks of foamy white. It's peaceful in a way that makes your shoulders drop half an inch. The man lowers the binoculars and clears his throat. Beautiful, isn't it? Hard to imagine anything out here being dangerous. You nod, though a flicker of something uneasy flutters through you. Maybe it's the way the ship hums beneath your palms, like a great beast, both powerful and fragile. Or maybe it's your brain looking ahead at the historical timeline and whispering, "Hey, maybe don't get too cozy." You keep walking, drifting back toward the heart of the promenade. The social tempo picks up again. Clinks of parasols tapping the floor, soft laughter. The faint rustle of newspapers being folded. Someone's pipe smoke threads through the air, mixing with sea breeze, and creating a scent that feels strangely timeless. You overhear a cluster of women discussing fashion, comparing the latest styles from Paris. One describes a gown so heavily beaded it required 2 maids to lift it. You picture it and wonder if that counts as wearable art or wearable workout equipment. You pause at a window and glance inside the reading room. A gentleman sits with his nose deep in a newspaper, oblivious to the world. Another guest politely sips tea while scanning the headlines. You catch a glimpse of an article mentioning wireless marvels and smile, because yes, that little radio room just a few decks away is busy sending and receiving messages that will soon create one of the biggest historical debates of all time. You return to the open deck, savoring the rhythm of your footsteps. The promenade isn't just a walkway. It's the ship's social engine. It's where introductions happen, where glances turn into conversations, where expectations bloom into tiny, polite dramas. This is the stage where first-class passengers perform who they believe they are, or who they desperately want others to think they are. As you near the bow again, a gust of wind makes you tighten your coat. The ship slices forward with such confidence that you feel yourself leaning into its momentum. The sun dips slightly, shifting the color palette of the world into molten gold. The promenade begins to glow. You take one more long look down the deck. The strolling figures, the soft chatter, the rhythmic clinks of heels and canes, and it hits you how intoxicating this floating world really is. Everything is designed to soothe, to elevate, to flatter. A place where even the air seems to whisper, "Relax, you're first class." What could possibly go wrong? You breathe in the cool Atlantic breeze, letting the moment settle into your bones. The promenade continues ahead, endless, graceful, full of stories waiting to be overheard. You ease away from the golden, lit promenade, letting the hush of the interior corridors embrace you again. The shift feels like stepping from a lively garden party into the soft, muffled heart of someone's private mansion. The carpet is thick beneath your feet, swallowing your steps like it's been trained to keep secrets. Lamps glow along the walls in warm amber pools, their glass shades shaped like blossoms that somehow manage to look both delicate and indestructibly expensive. You turn a corner, following the familiar rope back toward your stateroom. The hall gently narrows, the sounds of the promenade dissolving behind you, until all that remains is the soft hum of the ship's engines. The comforting purr that never fully stops, like a giant mechanical lullaby. Even now, you can feel the faintest sway of the ship, an easy side that reminds you you're gliding through a world of cold, dark water. It should be unsettling, but somehow it isn't. Maybe it's the luxury cushioning the fear, like a plush mattress cushioning a very anxious cat. Your cabin door waits ahead, its brass fittings gleaming in the low light. You slide your key into the lock and step inside, instantly greeted by the familiar blend of lavender, fresh linens, and the lingering hint of polish. The room feels warmer than when you left, a pocket of coziness carved into the vast steel palace. You shrug off your coat, letting it fall across the bed for a moment before folding it properly. Because even on vacation, some habits refuse to die. You take a slow tour of the space, as though seeing it for the first time. Your stateroom isn't one of the Titanic's massive parlor suites. No private promenade, no dining room, no personal wardrobe attendant. But it's still miles beyond anything the average traveler could dream of in 1912. The carved paneling on the walls mimics Edwardian homes, delicate scrollwork, floral borders, and gentle curves that make everything feel lovingly handcrafted. A pair of plush armchairs flank a small table, where fresh fruit waits in a bowl, the apples polished to mirror, like shine. You're half convinced a steward buffed them, individually with the gentleness, usually reserved for newborn babies. A light knock sounds, and when you open the door, a steward wheels in your luggage. He places each piece carefully, almost ceremoniously, as though your suitcase contains royal documents, instead of socks you forgot to pair. He asks if you need assistance unpacking. You politely decline, though part of you is tempted. After all, what's more first class than letting someone else figure out the puzzle of where your spare shirt ended up? Still, you're trying to maintain at least a tangential connection to your dignity. After he leaves, you cross to the wardrobe and begin arranging your things. Shirts hang neatly, shoes find their spot, and your travel case opens to reveal grooming essentials. You set them on the dressing table, its surface glossy enough to reflect your face in a slightly stretched, funhouse way that somehow feels flattering. The oval mirror above the table catches your form, framed by soft light. You sit on the cushioned stool for a moment, letting your fingers trace the small glass perfume bottles and grooming tools arranged with almost military precision. A thought whispers through your mind, a tiny reminder that this level of design wasn't just for comfort. White Star Line wanted first-class passengers to feel at home enough to choose their ships again and again. That's your historical fact for this section. They deliberately built staterooms to mimic upscale London hotels, so wealthy travelers wouldn't feel like they were roughing it at sea. To be fair, based on the silky sheets beneath your hand, they succeeded. You wander deeper into the cabin, letting your fingertips brush across the patterned carpet, the textured wallpaper, the polished wood. You open the small writing desk and discover a few sheets of embossed Titanic stationery. The ship's name, printed in elegant script, makes you pause. You imagine writing a letter, having a lovely voyage, eating far too well, pretending I know which spoon to use first. You picture the letter waiting in a future museum and resist the urge to write something wildly unhelpful like, "Also, send help. I seem to have misplaced my sanity somewhere on sea deck." As you continue exploring, something else catches your eye, the call button panel beside the bed. There's one button for the steward, another for the bedroom attendant, and, of all things, a bell to request your maid. Yes, you have a maid assigned to you, because apparently the Titanic's designers believed luxury travelers could not be trusted to function without a small, personal staff. You wonder what would happen if you pressed all 3 buttons at once. Probably a meeting of extremely polite panic. You step into the adjoining bathroom space, compact but well appointed. A porcelain sink gleams beneath soft light, with a row of neatly arranged toiletries supplied by the ship. The water taps are labeled Ut and Suld in a stylish serif font that somehow looks judgmental. You twist the hot tap out of curiosity, and to your surprise, almost immediately warm water gushes out. That's your quirky detail. Titanic's first-class cabins had nearly instant hot water because the ship's boilers heated enormous tanks specifically for this purpose. Luxury isn't just furniture, it's plumbing sorcery. You lean on the sink for a moment, studying your reflection. The warmth from the tap fogs the lower corner of the mirror. You wipe the condensation away with your thumb, feeling oddly sentimental. There's something deeply comforting about having a private space like this. Your own little sanctuary in a world that's massive, loud, and unpredictably cold on the other side of the hull. You return to the main room and throw yourself gently onto the bed, letting the mattress cradle you like it's been trained for Olympic-level softness. You sink in so deeply you could swear the bed is trying to adopt you. You stretch, feeling every muscle sigh in relief. The hum of the engines vibrates softly through the frame, syncing with your breathing. Time slips. Maybe 10 minutes pass. Maybe 30. The ship rocks gently, a motion that lulls your mind into something loose and dreamlike. You close your eyes. The sounds around you blend into a soothing soup of distant footsteps, soft chatter from the corridor, and the low whisper of water sliding past steel. Eventually, the cabin feels just a touch warm. You sit up to adjust the little steam heater in the corner. Carefully, because these Edwardian devices sometimes surpass cozy warmth and skip straight to volcano cosplay. You twist the valve until the soft hiss fades to a faint whisper, then return to your seat by the window. You draw the heavy curtains aside, revealing a view framed in polished metal. The ocean stretches into a blue so deep it borders on black. Sunlight glitters across the waves like spilled diamonds. The angle of the ship's movement makes the waterline tilt gently, rising and falling like a slow breath. You rest your elbow on the small ledge and lean your forehead to the cool glass. For a moment, you simply exist, still, quiet, watching the world slide by. A sudden knock startles you. You straighten as a steward enters with a tray of afternoon tea. He places it on the table with the precision of someone who once practiced balancing porcelain under battlefield conditions. You thank him, and he withdraws. The tray is a miniature feast, dainty sandwiches, a small pot of tea, a stack of biscuits that look so perfectly aligned you hesitate to disturb them. You pour the tea, watching the steam curl up like a tiny ghost doing interpretive dance. You take a sip and hum in approval. Smooth, warm, lightly floral. Exactly the kind of tea that makes you question every beverage choice you've made in the last week. You nibble on a biscuit, letting crumbs fall with reckless disregard for the carpet, because that's what vacuums and stewards are for. A little joke pops into your head. In first class, even the crumbs look like they come from a wealthy family. You set the cup down and wander back to the wardrobe. You pull out a coat you haven't worn in ages, brushing a hand over the fabric. You imagine stepping out later in full first-class style, walking those polished decks as though the ship were built specifically for your enjoyment. Which, honestly, is almost true. Another stretch of quiet passes. You find yourself pacing the room slowly, feeling the slight shift of the floor beneath your feet. Your hand trails along the wall, tracing the delicate patterns carved into the paneling. At one point, you pause to look at a decorative brass fixture, an ornate, almost gaudy sconce shaped like a curling leaf. You tilt your head. Does it look a little crooked? Historians still argue whether the ship's decorative fixtures were perfectly aligned, or if some were slightly off because workers were rushed. You smile. Even perfection has its debates. You drift to the chaise longue again, sinking into its cushioned embrace. Your body relaxes deeply, limbs growing heavy. This is the kind of comfort that whispers, "Stay. Just stay." You close your eyes for a moment, savoring the gentle warmth, the quiet hum, the soft embrace of a world that feels safe, even though a small whisper in the back of your mind knows better. A faint vibration runs through the cabin, an adjustment of speed, perhaps. You open your eyes. For a moment, you imagine what lies below. Enormous pistons driving the ship forward, gears and shafts turning with relentless precision, stokers feeding mountains of coal into furnace mouths that glow like miniature suns. The thought is both awe-inspiring and unnerving. So much power beneath your feet, so much trust placed in human skill and steel. You stand and wander back to the window, watching the sky shift toward late afternoon. Clouds drift lazily. The horizon glows with a warm haze. The ocean has smoothed into a calm expanse, the waves gentle and rhythmic. Inside your cabin, the light softens, wrapping everything in afternoon gold. It feels peaceful, comforting, as though the ship wants to cradle you in its arms for just a little longer. And you let it. This private world, the carpeted hallway, the warm lamp glow, the soft bed, the steaming tea, becomes your own little kingdom. A place on a floating palace where you can sleep, dream, breathe, and pretend that nothing bad could ever happen, as long as you're surrounded by fine linens and thick walls. A sanctuary at sea, and for now, that's enough. Even before you step inside the first-class dining saloon, you can feel its presence. A low, elegant hum drifting down the corridor, a blend of silverware, laughter, and quietly practiced refinement. To enter is to cross a threshold into a room that seems to glow with its own confidence. The polished white paneling, the soft cream accents, and the forest of columns, rising toward a ceiling patterned in delicate plasterwork, make the space feel less like a room on a moving ship, and more like a grand hotel fixed firmly on land. But it's the sound that defines it, a synchronized clatter of porcelain and silver, in rhythm with the ship's subtle vibration. Stewards glide between tables as though pulled by invisible strings. No wasted moves, no accidental brushes of cloth or elbow. You can see the training in every gesture. A hand that pours wine at precisely the right angle. A posture that respects hierarchy. An expression that says I am here, but I am not to be seen. The tables themselves are miniature worlds. Crisp linens so immaculate you wonder if they were ironed twice. Cutlery arranged not just for eating but for storytelling. Each fork, spoon, and knife announcing the meal's structure, its progression from delicate beginnings to triumphant finales. Place cards bear names both lofty and newly minted. Old money seated alongside magnates whose fortunes were mined, engineered, or assembled brick by brick. Then the courses begin. You taste soups that steam like gentle invitations, accompanied by warm rolls whose softness mocks the cold Atlantic outside. A second course arrives before conversation can lull. Perhaps a richly scented fish, served with a sauce requiring both expertise and audacity. Meat follows, bold and ceremonial, carved with a flourish that draws eyes from nearby tables. Vegetables are not mere afterthoughts, but curated accompaniments, chosen for color, season, and balance. Dessert is both spectacle and surrender, molded creams, delicate pastries, fruits arranged with painterly precision. By the time coffee and cordials appear, the room feels almost dreamlike, as though the meal has been a slow spell cast over the senses. Yet beneath the glamour lies choreography, with its own invisible tension. Head stewards evaluate. Junior stewards memorize. Chefs time their creations to the heartbeat of the ship's engines. And the diners, aware or not, become performers too. Every raised glass, every politely veiled critique, every compliment shaped to impress companions is part of the ritual. You leave the saloon not simply full, but initiated. It is not just a place to eat. It is a theatre where elegance is rehearsed, hierarchy is reaffirmed, and the floating world of first-class society decides, one course at a time, who will shine and who will merely glitter. If the first-class decks are a stage of polished rituals, then below them lies the vast, unseen machinery of human effort that makes every moment of that performance possible. When you descend into the service corridors, narrower, warmer, stripped of ornament, you feel the ship change character. The air thickens with steam, starch, coal dust, and purpose. Here, the uniform is not evening dress but efficiency. Stewards move quickly, their shoes whispering across linoleum floors, polished to a shine no passenger will ever see. They walk with small notebooks tucked into pockets. Orders to remember, dietary instructions, personal preferences of passengers who may never bother to learn their names. You hear clipped Irish, soft Yorkshire vowels, London quick, talk, Belfast steadiness, voices carrying familiarity and fatigue. Cabin stewards work in rotations that verge on the impossible. Before dawn, they are already making the rounds, checking fires in private staterooms, laying out hot water for washing, brushing off the faintest hint of lint from dress coats, tightening a screw on a wobbly drawer so the guest never discovers it was loose. They can tell which passengers leave newspapers in a neat pile and which scatter personal effects like falling leaves. They know who likes Turkish baths before breakfast, who requires urgent tea service after, who expects conversation, and who prefers silence. Down another corridor, you pass scullions, faces flushed from heat, scrubbing pans the size of small boats. Their world is a constant clash of steel and hot water, the soundtrack of a floating hotel that must never falter. They may glimpse the ocean only on breaks, and even then, through a narrow crew hatch that smells of rope and salt. Lower still, the engine room hums with a deep mechanical heartbeat. The men working there, stokers and trimmers, exist in a different universe altogether. The heat is staggering, the labor relentless. They feed the ship's appetite for coal hour after hour, knowing that without them, chandeliers upstairs would dim, pianos would fall silent, and the dining saloon would collapse into darkness. Sweat runs in rivers. Conversations are shouted or not spoken at all. Their bodies carry the true weight of the Titanic's elegance. And yet, despite the hierarchy, there is pride. A steward smoothing a first-class pillow takes satisfaction in the perfect crease. A baker rolling dough at midnight knows which passengers will call his bread the finest they've ever tasted. An engineer touching a valve feels the ship's pulse under his palm, understanding her in ways no passenger ever will. For all the differences in rank and responsibility, the staff share a quiet camaraderie forged from proximity and shared pressure. They swap jokes in hallways, steal moments of rest in cramped break rooms, pass along news and rumors before they reach the upper decks. This is the Titanic's hidden life, a parallel world beneath the guilt and grandeur. Its rhythm is faster, its stakes higher, its rewards quieter. Without it, the first-class experience would collapse like a stage set with no support beams. But here, in these corridors and bunk rooms and blazing furnaces, the ship's true endurance is built hour by hour, breath by breath, shovel by shovel. You're barely awake when the soft knock comes at your door. 2 taps. Polite but practiced. The kind that's meant to wake you without ever admitting responsibility for doing so. You drag yourself up, feeling the slight vibration of the ship humming through the mattress, and open the door to find your steward standing there with a warm smile and a tray that smells faintly of toast, orange peel, and the kind of tea that could probably fix half the world's problems if we'd let it. He sets it on your side table with a quiet, "Good morning, sir," or, "Well, good morning to whichever version of you is awake enough to hear me." And just like that, you're back in the routine of Titanic's first-class mornings. Routines built not just from luxury, but from invisible choreography performed by people who've been awake far longer than you. The corridor outside your suite seems calmer at this hour, as if everyone on this deck knows that mornings should begin slowly, with the ship carrying you along like a gentle tide. Your steward reminds you, very apologetically, that the Turkish bath schedule is filling up, and if you want the full steam and sweat experience, his words are much more elegant, yours mentally are not. Now would be the time to claim your slot. You thank him, still shaking off sleep, and he slips out with the skill of someone who's been trained to take up negative space. You dress lightly. Mornings on the Titanic have a distinct feel, somewhere between a London hotel and a seaside resort. Only the resort happens to be floating, and the seaside is everywhere. The corridor carries a faint warmth from the heating pipes behind the walls, and at every turn, stewards float by like ghosts with perfect posture. When you step into the Turkish bath area, the change in atmosphere is immediate. Humid air hits your face in a soft wave, warm enough to fog your thoughts, soothing enough that you briefly forget your hours from any coastline. The floor tiles gleam in a mosaic of blues and creams, and a distant hiss of steam echoes against high walls. A few first-class passengers are already here, drifting from the cooling room to the hot room with the kind of languid movements you normally only see in cats. As you settle into the warmth, a steward hands you a towel warmed to the perfect borderline, too hot temperature. You stretch out and let your muscles soften, feeling the sweat begin to build in tiny rivulets along your temples. The room smells faintly of eucalyptus, one of those quirky details no one expects on a transatlantic voyage, but here it is, floating around you like invisible comfort. You remind yourself, because you can't resist one little joke every 1,000 words, that you once tried a steam room at a modern gym and nearly fled after 60 seconds. Here though, in Titanic's Turkish baths, you feel like you could nap for 3 hours and wake up as a slightly improved version of yourself. Steam curls around your ankles, and you listen to murmured conversations drifting across the chamber. Some speak of business opportunities in New York. Others discuss the previous night's card games. One gentleman, quite seriously, insists that the warm tiles here improve digestion. Acclaimed historians still argue whether he genuinely believed or whether this was his era's version of bro science. You chuckle quietly, earning a suspicious side eye from a gentleman nearby, who clearly takes his steaming very seriously. After a long soak and a brief stop in the electric bath, you don't stay long. Your nerves have filed a formal complaint. You wander toward the swimming bath. The room is cool, sharply so after the Turkish suite, and the scent shifts to something crisp, like the first inhale of winter air. The pool is small by modern standards but dazzling, tiled in blue with brass railings that gleam under electric lights. You dip a toe in. It's freezing. Not like refreshing. No, like someone filled the pool with melted snow and whispered, "Good luck." Two men plunge in without hesitation, apparently numb to the temperature, while you take the more dignified approach of casually pretending you never intended to swim anyway. You stand at the edge, nodding thoughtfully as if evaluating the concept of water itself. A steward walks past, barely hiding his amusement. You press on to the gymnasium, where the day's energy is beginning to spark. The room is alive with movement. Pulleys, ropes, stationary bikes, and the strange horse riding contraption that looks suspiciously like it was designed by someone who lost a bet. There's a fencing master offering lessons, his blade slicing the air with a theatrical whoosh. You hop onto the bicycle machine, pedaling lazily, admiring the view from the porthole. Here you get your mainstream historical fact of the day. Titanic's gym was equipped with some of the most advanced exercise machines of its time, including electrically controlled models that fascinated passengers who'd rarely seen electricity used for anything beyond lighting. Your quirky tidbit arrives soon after. One of the gym's most popular attractions is the mechanical camel. Yes, a camel. You can't help imagining someone proudly explaining this back home. How was the ship? Oh, lovely. I rode a mechanical camel while crossing the Atlantic. Should we be worried? You move on before someone suggests you try it. As you walk, you notice how different morning energy is here. The ship feels younger at this hour, not yet fully dressed in its evening glamour. People chat more casually, comparing plans, commenting on the surprisingly calm sea. The floor beneath you vibrates with the soft pulse of the engines. Strong, steady, confident. And yet, there's a moment, brief, hardly noticeable, where one older gentleman gazes out a porthole longer than necessary. His fingers tap against the frame in a slow pattern. He murmurs something about the weather, perhaps too quietly. Historians still debate whether some passengers felt an unspoken tension in the air on this particular morning, or whether that's hindsight filling in shadows that were never really there. But you don't linger on it. Instead, you follow the warm smell drifting down the passageway, freshly baked rolls from the pantry above. Breakfast service is about to begin upstairs. Time to rejoin the floating palace. Yet as you climb the stairs, you feel a subtle understanding settle into you. First-class life on the Titanic isn't just luxury, it's ritual. Steam, sweat, ice, cold plunges, aware of exercise machines, and conversations carried on exhaled clouds. It's a morning shaped by choices nobody else on the ship has the privilege to make. And as you step back into the brighter corridor, towel draped over your shoulder, you feel that privilege wrap around you like warm air, even as the ship continues forward, slicing through the Atlantic with the confidence of something that believes it has all the time in the world. You head toward the grand staircase again, towel fresh and gym loosened, but the morning has shifted. The sunlight streaming through the glass dome has tilted, brightened. sharpened into something fuller. Like the ship has officially decided it's awake now, and you'd better keep up. The carved oak gleams richer than it did an hour ago, and the cherub at the banister seems to smirk at you in that, "Oh, you again." way. Maybe you're imagining it. Maybe the steam room has rewired your neurons. Hard to tell. Breakfast service is in full swing by the time you glide into the first-class dining saloon. The hum of voices is soft, restrained, like everyone agreed beforehand to keep things at a polite murmur. You take your seat, while a steward in spotless white gloves pours coffee that smells like it could convince anyone to make better life decisions. The china clinks as passengers unfold their napkins, and you catch snatches of conversation from nearby tables, stock prices, travel plans. Someone insisting that New York's weather won't dare misbehave when they arrive. Your tablemate, a cheerful woman returning to Boston, leans in to whisper that she's already on her third croissant. "Don't judge," she says, even though you absolutely weren't. You reassure her with the first light joke of this 1,000-word stretch. "Look, I survived the mechanical camel this morning. You're allowed your pastry quota." She laughs, and it echoes just enough to draw a glance from a man at the next table who seems allergic to joy. As you sip your coffee, a steward lays out the day's breakfast offerings, and they're exactly as extravagant as you'd expect on a ship determined to prove it's superior to literally all other boats on Earth. Kippered herring, omelettes, fried potatoes, fruit you're pretty sure cost more to ship than your cabin, fresh rolls still warm enough to fog your fingers. The Titanic didn't do simple breakfasts. It did morning feasts disguised as meals. And tucked into this spread is your mainstream historical fact. First-class passengers could order nearly anything they wanted for breakfast, and the kitchen staff, over 100 strong, worked through the night to ensure ingredients were prepped, pastries baked, and coffee brewed to perfection long before anyone stumbled in half asleep. While you navigate your plate, you notice how quickly stewards move, sliding between tables like white, gloved precision instruments. There's an odd beauty in watching them work. Quiet coordination, discrete signals, an unbroken flow that seems almost like dance choreography. You take a moment to appreciate it. They nod politely, but their eyes stay alert. These men remember your preferences more accurately than you remember your own passwords. A passenger across the room waves for extra cream, and a steward appears so quickly it's almost supernatural. Historians still argue whether the staff genuinely trained at that level, or whether the white glove service has been mythologized into near magic over the years. But watching them now, you're convinced the legends might be true. Your second joke rolls in quietly when your tablemate complains that her spoon has fallen to the floor. "No worries," you whisper. "I'm pretty sure losing flatware is the first-class equivalent of a felony. Someone will materialize with a replacement before you blink." And sure enough, a steward replaces it so efficiently it feels like conjuring. After breakfast, you step back into the corridor, where the energy has shifted toward late morning leisure. People drift toward the lounge for reading or letter writing. You follow them, drawn by the promise of upholstered armchairs and the gentle hush that only a room full of people pretending to be productive can generate. The first-class lounge is a world unto itself. Moss-colored carpet, velvet chairs, paneling carved so intricately you suspect it was designed specifically to impress your ancestors. The room smells faintly of books, cigar boxes not yet opened for the day, and polish. Sunlight filters through patterned windows, breaking into soft geometric shapes across the carpet. You take a seat near a window and pull out a writing set thoughtfully provided in your stateroom. The paper is smooth enough to make modern notebooks jealous as you begin writing the obligatory "Wish you were here" line. Though honestly, do you? You overhear someone explaining the ship's Marconi room. They claim the wireless operators hardly sleep. You make a mental note that will matter later in ways no one in this lounge could imagine. Your quirky tidbit for this section arrives when one woman casually mentions that she's brought a portable spirit stove in her luggage to make tea in her cabin. You blink. You're no safety inspector, but the idea of boiling water next to piles of Edwardian silk dresses feels bold. Apparently, small personal stoves were fairly common among travelers of the time, though the crew pretended not to notice as long as nothing literally combusted. You write a few more lines on your stationery, pausing when a steward approaches with the morning's newspapers. They're printed on board. Yes, the ship literally has a daily paper, pulled from wire transmissions and formatted in a miniature press with more pride than some city newsrooms. You skim global headlines, shipping updates, and a short note about calm seas. Everything reads normal. Almost too normal. When you stand to stretch your legs, the room's ambience shifts to a warm buzz. Passengers debate stock investments, upcoming plays in New York, and a rumor about an especially elaborate dinner coming later in the week. You slip out, weaving through groups gathered in little conversational islands. You wander toward the promenade deck, where late morning air hits you with refreshing coolness. The sky is clear, the sea calm enough to look like polished glass. You lean on the railing, letting the breeze run fingers through your hair. The ship's wake stretches behind like a silver ribbon. Everything feels stable, reassuring, almost smug in its smooth progress. Then comes your third required joke. A gentle one, as always. If the ocean were any calmer, it'd be submitting a rare some to become a giant decorative pond. Someone walking nearby chuckles, proving that your humor has at least a small fan club on this ship. As you stroll, you notice a cluster of passengers gathered around the ship's photographer. He's busy capturing the glamour of first-class life, arranging people like living portraits. A few women complain the breeze is too playful with their hats. A man insists on standing with one hand on the railing for effect. You're tempted to join, but you already imagine your face immortalized as person who blinked in every historical photo, so you keep walking. Just ahead, two men are discussing the day's lunch menu, debating whether to request a dish off the standard service. That's something only first-class passengers can do. Ask for special orders. Personal preferences, tailoring. One claims he's asked for curry tomorrow. The other insists he's requesting a special fruit plate because he doesn't trust American fruit. You remind yourself people in 1912 had very strong opinions about produce. The bell chimes faintly from within the ship, signaling the late morning transition toward midday. Crew members begin preparing for the next round of meals. Passengers drift towards staterooms to freshen up. You take a last look across the endless horizon. Blue on blue, calm on calm. And even though nothing seems amiss, you feel the faintest shift in mood, like an undercurrent of awareness. Not fear, never fear, but the sense that this perfect morning is only one frame in a much larger reel. You exhale, shake the thought away, and follow the others inside, carried by the rhythm of luxury continuing as if the world has promised to stay gentle forever. By mid-morning, the ship hums with an energy that's part anticipation, part practiced calm. You drift back to the promenade, choosing a side sheltered from the sun, but still close enough to watch life unfold. The gentle rocking beneath your feet has become a familiar pulse, almost meditative, and the scent of salt carries a strange comfort, mingling with faint perfume, polished wood, and the occasional waft of coal smoke from far below. You breathe deeply, letting the air fill your lungs, and for a fleeting second, the Atlantic feels like a private companion rather than a vast, indifferent expanse. Passengers stroll in clusters, couples and small groups performing the subtle choreography of upper-class social life. A woman in a wide hat leans lightly on the railing, speaking softly to a companion whose monocle catches the sunlight in a sparkling flare. You notice how gestures, nods, and even the slight lift of a chin communicate hierarchy as efficiently as any spoken word. Even the casual glances across the deck carry meaning, perhaps a hint of approval, perhaps a veiled challenge. Historians still argue whether these performances were conscious social signaling or simply a byproduct of Edwardian etiquette. Children scamper past, supervised by governesses who are both vigilant and exhausted. You pause to watch one little girl adjust her sailor collar, fussing with exacting precision, as if the entire voyage depends on it. A mechanical doll rattles faintly in her small hand, a quirky tidbit that reminds you how seriously first-class families treated leisure, even at sea. Toys were miniature status symbols, and this one is crafted with enough joints to rival a marionette. The ship's officers pass by on inspection rounds, their crisp uniforms and confident strides a subtle reminder that behind the luxury, structure governs everything. The first-class promenade may feel like endless leisure, but the Titanic is a finely tuned machine, and every step you take here relies on unseen labor below decks. You reflect on the hierarchies of service, the stewards, the bakers, the engineers, all working in synchrony so you can watch the waves in quiet comfort. A small group of passengers gathers around the ship's photographer. Cameras in 1912 are bulky and awkward, and yet they are a novelty to be celebrated. You can almost hear the whispered calculations, angle of the hat, tilt of the head, light on the cheek. One woman's hat proves uncooperative in the breeze, requiring adjustments from an attentive steward. You smirk inwardly, realizing that controlling the wind is as impossible then as it is now. You wander closer to the aft, drawn by the faint hum of conversation and the scent of freshly polished deck chairs. There's an ease here, a sense that people are beginning to find their rhythm, their own version of comfort on a floating palace. Men discuss investments, fashion, or upcoming events in New York. Women exchange the latest social gossip, occasionally leaning close to make sure only certain ears hear. You notice a small detail: some passengers carry pocketbooks, small leather-bound volumes, likely diaries or notes meant for private amusement. A subtle insight into how meticulously life is curated at sea. Your attention drifts to the ship's instruments, mounted discreetly along the railing. Compasses, barometers, and other nautical tools gleam with importance. A steward nearby explains that some passengers enjoy tracking the voyage's progress themselves, a quirky hobby that mixes curiosity with mild obsession. You watch a man jotting notes on a pad, seemingly noting wind speed, wave patterns, and direction, as though he could outperform the officers if given the helm. Historians still argue whether these passenger hobbyists contributed anything meaningful to navigation, or were simply indulging their fascination with novelty. A bell chimes softly from somewhere within the ship, signaling an approaching meal or gathering. The timing is impeccable, as if the ship itself maintains social cadence, nudging first-class passengers through their carefully orchestrated routines. You realize that being in first class is not merely about luxury. It's about participating in an ongoing performance where every gesture, glance, and movement fits into an invisible rhythm. You pause at a corner, letting the breeze hit your face. The sunlight glimmers across the Atlantic, and the water stretches toward infinity. A small flock of gulls drifts overhead, following the ship's wake with almost polite persistence. It's both calming and disarming. The ocean is vast and indifferent, yet here you are, walking confidently along a crafted promenade, as if you belong. You remind yourself, quietly, that this fleeting perfection is the product of meticulous planning, human skill, and a touch of whimsy. the combined effort of hundreds of souls working tirelessly behind the scenes. From the corner of your eye, you spot a group of young men engaging in light conversation about an upcoming chess match in the lounge. Their jackets are perfectly tailored, their gestures precise. You admire the casual elegance, the way even small talk seems choreographed. And then you see a small notebook tucked in one pocket, likely recording wagers or strategy notes. You imagine the whispered banter as they prepare for a match that is both game and status symbol. It is yet another layer in the complex social world aboard Titanic, layers you've only just begun to notice. The promenade stretches ahead, wide and glistening, inviting exploration. You continue walking, letting the rhythm of footsteps, gentle wind, and distant laughter weave into a slow, almost hypnotic pattern. Each turn of the railing, each glance at the horizon, reminds you that first-class life aboard Titanic is a blend of comfort, performance, and subtle tension. Luxury wrapped in movement, where appearances matter as much as reality, and where the sea itself serves as a quiet audience to human behavior. You drift toward the grand staircase once more, letting the sunlight catch the polished wood and glass panels, making them glow with the kind of warmth that feels like a gentle invitation. It's mid-morning now, and the ship's social rhythm is fully awake. First-class passengers glide along the deck and through the corridors with the practiced ease of people who have rehearsed these movements for decades, or at least trained themselves to look that way. You notice a pair of ladies adjusting their gloves and hats, whispering to each other about last night's card game and the upcoming luncheon, and you can't help but smile. It's like stepping into a living, breathing etiquette manual, and you're part of the experiment. As you reach the top of the staircase, you pause to admire the ornate ironwork of the banisters. The intricate carvings spiral upward, catching the light and shadow in ways that feel almost deliberate, almost magical. A steward passes, bowing so perfectly it seems rehearsed. You realize that everyone here is performing, even those who think they aren't. Behind the scenes, down corridors lined with polished brass, other stewards hurry to anticipate the next wave of demands, ensuring that the illusion of effortless luxury never falters. Walking into the lounge, you notice the subtle changes in conversation tone. This is where mornings blend into midday plans. Men discuss investment opportunities and upcoming theatrical performances in New York. Women debate hats, fashion trends, and the minutiae of social obligations with a precision that borders on surgical. You overhear one woman remark, almost conspiratorially, that she heard the chef has a secret ingredient for his soffades. Your curiosity is piqued. Quirky tidbit: the Titanic's chefs were famous for small, almost obsessive personal touches, adding tiny, sometimes unusual flavors or garnishes to set themselves apart. You imagine the chaos behind the kitchen doors, hundreds of dishes moving like clockwork, and yet somehow everything emerging perfectly plated. You glance toward the windows, where the Atlantic stretches into the horizon like a living canvas. The sunlight catches the waves, creating a shimmer that dances across the water's surface. You breathe in deeply, catching the faint scent of salt mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee and fresh pastries from the lounge. The ocean seems both infinite and intimate at once, a paradox you can't quite resolve. You remind yourself that historians still argue whether passengers fully appreciated these views, or if the novelty simply faded after a few days. But for now, the calm beauty is undeniable, wrapping the ship and its inhabitants in a bubble of serene opulence. You wander back to the promenade for a brief stroll, noting the way the morning sun casts long, elegant shadows across the deck. Couples hold hands, discussing trivialities with the gravitas of diplomats negotiating treaties. Children dash ahead under the watchful eyes of governesses, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the quiet, measured pace of adult conversation. The mechanical camel from the gym flashes briefly in your memory. A ridiculous but endearing reminder of the ship's idiosyncrasies. You chuckle quietly. Even in the midst of refinement, there is space for whimsy. A steward approaches with a small notebook, asking if you'd like a cup of tea or a fresh pastry. You nod, marveling at the seamless efficiency. Every desire anticipated, every need met. It's a world built on invisible labor, and you feel an odd mix of gratitude and guilt for being the beneficiary. The cup of tea arrives within moments, perfectly warm, and you sip slowly, savoring both taste and ritual. Historians still debate the extent to which such meticulous service influenced passenger satisfaction versus mere novelty, but from where you stand, it is undeniably comforting. Looking around, you notice that even the subtle creak of the deck underfoot seems orchestrated. Footsteps fall in measured patterns, and the wind plays softly through rigging and railings. The sea's constant motion mirrors the social choreography above, reminding you that beneath the elegance lies a powerful, moving machine. You feel a slight thrill, an awareness that all this beauty is precariously balanced, entirely dependent on human skill and steel. A group of young men passes by, discussing their plans for tennis on the forward deck. One adjusts his hat dramatically, another pretends to examine the horizon with binoculars. You chuckle again, thinking that the Titanic seems like a floating microcosm of society rules, displays, subtle competition, and carefully contained indulgence. Each glance, gesture, and conversation is part of the narrative, a performance in which you are both spectator and participant. Finally, you pause at the railing, leaning forward slightly to watch the wake. It stretches behind like a silver ribbon, slicing the deep blue of the Atlantic. You notice the way the sunlight catches tiny spray droplets, making them twinkle. This is your quiet moment amidst the orchestrated social theatre. A moment to simply exist, to breathe in the warmth, the motion, and the calm certainty that, at least for now, everything is exactly as it should be. The ship moves forward, elegant and unstoppable, and you move with it, carried by the rhythm, the luxury, and the subtle thrill of participating in something both grand and ephemeral. The afternoon settles in like a slow, golden tide, and you find yourself wandering toward the first-class library. The room is smaller than the dining saloon or the lounge, but it carries a gravitas all its own. Shelves of leather, bound volumes climb toward the ceiling, polished wood, reflecting the light filtering through the patterned windows. The faint scent of ink, varnish, and old paper hits you immediately, comforting and intoxicating all at once. A quiet hush pervades the space, broken only by the soft footfalls of other passengers or the occasional turn of a page. You notice the subtle hierarchy of usage. Some are here for study, some for leisure, and some simply for the prestige of being able to walk among the volumes. You take a seat in one of the upholstered armchairs, running your fingers over the smooth armrests. The room is designed for comfort, yet there's an underlying insistence on decorum. A man seated across the aisle quietly adjusts his spectacles, glancing at a book of maritime engineering. He looks up at you briefly, offering a polite nod, then returns to his work. You realize that even in quiet, there is performance, a small, almost imperceptible display of etiquette. Historians still argue whether first-class passengers ever truly relaxed in spaces like these, or if the constant awareness of observation kept them perpetually self-conscious. On the table beside you lies a small stack of newspapers, freshly delivered by the steward. You pick up the top one and scan headlines about distant cities, political intrigues, and mundane shipping news. The wireless room aboard the Titanic keeps the papers updated daily, a remarkable achievement for the era, and a fact that feels almost futuristic in its precision. You allow yourself a wry smile, thinking of how a century later, We complain if our apps are 5 minutes late. Your attention is drawn to a child at the far corner of the library, her tiny fingers carefully turning pages of an illustrated fairy tale. The governess hovers, making gentle corrections, but mostly allowing the child to immerse herself. It's a quirky scene, a large, imposing ship with thousands of souls aboard. Yet here is a tiny, private universe, meticulously supervised and perfectly ordinary. The juxtaposition makes you pause, appreciating how first-class life blends spectacle and intimacy seamlessly. The quiet is punctuated by the arrival of the ship's pianist. He begins to play softly on a grand upright tucked in a corner, notes drifting lazily through the air. The music is delicate and unassuming, but it commands attention nonetheless. Passengers glance up, absorbing the atmosphere, some nodding in subtle approval. You realize that this is more than mere background. It's an audible layer of refinement, part of the invisible architecture of first-class experience. Another quirky tidbit, the pianist adjusts his sheet music for wind currents and sunlight, a minor detail that seems absurdly meticulous, until you hear the difference in tone. You leaf through a book at random, and your eyes land on a passage describing the engineering marvel of the ship itself. The Titanic was designed to be unsinkable, though you know the irony of that phrase will loom over history. Even as you read, you feel the ship's pulse beneath your feet, the constant vibration of engines, the hum of steam, the subtle sway that has become a rhythmic companion. You reflect on how this knowledge, combined with luxury, created an illusion of complete control over nature, a belief so pervasive that few questioned it. A group of women nearby discusses their plans for afternoon tea and bridge. Their voices are low, carefully modulated, but you catch hints of rivalry and strategy, subtle as the placement of a book on a shelf. First-class life on the Titanic is about more than comfort. It's about positioning, social, intellectual, and even culinary. The sophistication here feels almost performative, yet natural, a delicate balancing act perfected over decades of leisure culture. Historians still argue whether this constant attention to social maneuvering provided genuine enjoyment, or created a persistent, low-level anxiety. You glance around, noticing the minute details. The embossed Titanic logo on the corner of the card catalogue, the brass handles polished to a mirror shine, the careful spacing of chairs to allow both privacy and visibility. Even the lighting seems orchestrated, ensuring that no one is caught in harsh shadow. Every element is designed to convey luxury, refinement, and effortless taste, all the while hiding the massive human effort beneath it. A steward approaches, carrying a small tray with tea and biscuits. You accept it politely, feeling that even such a simple gesture carries weight. Tea poured from a silver pot, biscuits arranged just so. This is the service that defines first-class life, a choreography of attentiveness and grace. You sip slowly, feeling the warmth spread, and realize the room is almost a microcosm of the Titanic itself, vast, elegant, layered with complexity, and dependent on countless unseen hands to maintain its illusion of ease. The afternoon stretches lazily. You spend time reading, observing, sipping tea, and letting the rhythms of the room envelop you. The sway of the ship, the muffled conversations, the faint notes of piano, and the scent of paper and polish combine into a sensory lullaby. You understand, more fully than ever, that first-class experience is both a performance and a sanctuary, a world deliberately crafted to make its passengers feel both significant and cocooned, safe within its golden walls, drifting across the Atlantic. The late afternoon sun has begun its slow descent, painting the promenade deck with long, warm streaks of gold. You wander back outside, letting the sea breeze kiss your face as you take in the quiet splendor of first-class leisure. The air carries that delicate mix of salt and varnish, softened by sunlight bouncing off polished wood and brass railings. You notice the steady rhythm of passengers strolling, leaning, or sitting in deck chairs, all moving in synchrony with the ship itself. It's almost hypnotic, the way motion and light collaborate to create a floating stage of elegance. You pause to watch a game of deck quoits, a sort of ring toss competition designed to entertain without disturbing anyone's dignity. Men in crisp suits bend slightly, eyes narrowed in concentration, tossing metal rings with an exaggerated precision that's both comical and impressive. Women, seated nearby, clap politely, exchanging remarks in hushed tones that hint at admiration, critique, or mild amusement. A quirky detail catches your eye. One player's rings are engraved with initials, likely to prevent theft or accidental loss. But the gesture makes you chuckle. Only on Titanic could a game so trivial become a subtle assertion of identity and class. Nearby, a pair of elderly gentlemen discuss maritime engineering. One leans heavily on his cane, the other gestures animatedly toward the horizon. Their conversation drifts toward the mechanics of the ship. Boilers, engines, hull design, while a small group of onlookers pretends not to eavesdrop. Historians still argue whether these informal exchanges actually deepened passenger understanding or simply served as a performative display of erudition. Either way, the dialogue adds texture to the afternoon, a reminder that intellect was as much a marker of first-class identity as dress or table manners. A steward glides past, offering chilled lemonade and small, intricately decorated pastries. You accept one, noting the delicate balance of flavors. A sweet almond filling, crisp shell, and just enough powdered sugar to make the experience playful without indulgent overkill. These small gestures of service feel magical now. They appear effortless, yet you know the unseen hours of preparation, precision, and care that make such moments possible. You sip your lemonade slowly, feeling both refreshment and the quiet satisfaction of being in a world built entirely for comfort and ease. The promenade deck offers not just views but social theatre. Couples lean casually against railings, exchanging private jokes. Children skip along the boards, occasionally squealing as they chase one another, while their governesses keep watch, with disciplined patience. You note a man photographing the scene with a cumbersome camera, adjusting the tripod with delicate care. It's a quirky contrast, the formal technology of photography capturing informal joy, preserving a fleeting moment in a medium that feels almost sacred against the immensity of the Atlantic. You meander toward the forward deck, drawn by the faint strains of conversation and the rhythmic creak of ropes against masts. A small group of women discusses the upcoming dinner menu, debating the merits of oysters, consommé, and roast lamb. Nearby, two gentlemen are engaged in a polite debate over which theatre production in New York promises the most cultural cachet. You overhear just enough to catch a subtle joke. Someone quips that one must always attend a play for social credit, never for enjoyment. You smile quietly, thinking that time hasn't changed that sentiment all that much. A sudden gust of wind lifts the edge of a lady's hat, sending it spinning lightly across the deck. A steward springs into action, catching it mid-air with a flourish that earns a polite nod from the lady and a suppressed chuckle from a nearby man. The gesture, so small yet precise, reminds you again that first-class life is built on invisible choreography. Every movement is anticipated, every reaction rehearsed, every courtesy executed with the kind of timing that borders on theatrical. You wonder how many passengers truly notice these details, or whether the perfection itself is meant to be absorbed unconsciously, an ambient luxury. As the afternoon wanes, you notice a young man sketching the scene in a small notebook, attempting to capture the interplay of light, shadow, and motion. His pencil flies across the page, recording the sway of deck chairs, the tilt of hats, the gentle curve of waves meeting the hull. You watch him for a moment, appreciating the quiet dedication, the curiosity, and the desire to document what feels ephemeral. Historians still debate how much of first-class life aboard Titanic has been accurately remembered versus romanticized, but sketches like these offer a tangible connection to a day that will otherwise exist only in recollection. You pause near the rail, gazing at the horizon where the sun begins to blur into the water, painting gold and amber reflections. The wake stretches behind the ship, a shimmering ribbon that gradually dissipates into the calm Atlantic. The gentle rocking of the vessel, combined with the murmur of conversations, distant laughter, and soft clinking of glasses from deck lounges, creates a layered soundtrack, simultaneously soothing and lively. You take a deep breath, letting the sensation of motion, light, and sound settle into your awareness, realizing that the afternoons on Titanic are as meticulously crafted as its meals, decor, and social interactions. And yet, beneath the comfort, there's a subtle awareness, a faint recognition that all this elegance exists atop immense human effort. The staff, unseen, work tirelessly below decks. Engineers, stokers, and stewards sustain the illusion of effortless perfection. The ship itself is alive with motion, a delicate balance of steam, steel, and human endeavor. You feel the soft thrill of knowing that, for this fleeting moment, you are a participant in a grand, orchestrated ballet. Suspended between ocean and horizon, luxury and labor, the ephemeral and the eternal. Evening begins to settle like a slow, velvety curtain over the ship. The golden light softens, stretching long shadows across the polished decks, making the intricate woodwork of the railings glow with a warmth that feels almost intimate. You drift toward the forward deck, where passengers gather to catch the last rays of the sun before dinner. The Atlantic is calm now, reflecting the fading light in liquid amber, and the gentle sway of the ship is more pronounced, reminding you that beneath all this elegance, the Titanic is still a massive, moving machine, carrying hundreds of dreams, routines, and whispered conversations across the ocean. Children run past under the watchful eyes of governesses, their laughter weaving through the air like musical notes. You spot a little girl with a mechanical doll clutched tightly to her chest, its arms jerking slightly with every step, a whimsical reminder of how serious leisure and play were aboard first-class decks. Nearby, a small group of men debate the merits of different cigars, their voices hushed but emphatic. It's an odd combination of triviality and gravity that seems to define the atmosphere. Everything matters, even the smallest gestures. And yet everything is conducted with a sense of refined detachment. Historians still argue whether this constant layering of etiquette created genuine enjoyment or simply a form of social rehearsal. You wander toward the aft section, drawn by a faint murmur of conversation and the glint of polished brass. Couples lean casually against the railings, their faces flushed by the gentle wind, whispering about dinner plans and upcoming arrivals in New York. A lady nearby adjusts the ribbons on her hat, frowning as the breeze plays with her coiffure. You smile at the absurdity, how such small details hold such importance, and recall the quirky tidbit about hats being nearly as significant as status itself on first-class decks. One misplacement, one slight tilt, could signal inattentiveness, and yet here it seems charmingly human. The promenade begins to fill with passengers enjoying the late afternoon ritual of gentle strolling. Some carry newspapers or sketchbooks, others simply walk, hands clasped behind their backs, observing. You notice a man taking careful notes on the ship's movements, peering over the rail at the wake, intrigued by the physics of motion. This tiny obsession is perfectly normal in this environment. First-class passengers have the luxury to cultivate odd hobbies or eccentricities that blend seamlessly with the cultivated elegance of the ship. Historians still debate how much of these behaviors were authentic curiosity versus performative leisure designed to convey refinement. A steward passes quietly, offering iced water in delicate glass tumblers. You take one, feeling the cool liquid slide down your throat as a small comfort in the evening warmth. The subtle attentiveness of the crew never fails to impress you. It's more than service. It's the art of anticipation. Each step, gesture, and glance is choreographed, and yet it never feels mechanical. Somehow, the human warmth and professionalism coexist in perfect harmony with the ship's grandeur. You pause near a cluster of passengers observing the horizon, their binoculars lifted, faces tilted toward the dying sunlight. The reflections ripple across the water, and a faint mist rises from the sea. The ocean seems endless, silent yet alive, carrying the Titanic forward with an imperceptible majesty. You inhale deeply, appreciating the rare luxury of time and space to simply exist on a floating palace, untethered from urgency, cocooned in comfort and quiet observation. A small ensemble of passengers engages in conversation about art and music, debating the merits of different compositions and performances. Their discussion is thoughtful yet light, a subtle social dance where wit and knowledge are currency. You drift closer, listening to the nuances of speech, the careful placement of compliments and mild criticisms. First, class life is always performance, even when the performance appears effortless. You can't help but admire the skill with which people balance intellect, social grace, and charm. Finally, the soft chime of the ship's bell signals the approach of dinner. The timing is impeccable, as if the vessel itself is a conductor cueing an orchestra. Passengers begin to drift toward the dining saloon, adjusting hats, gloves, and ties, rehearsing smiles and small talk. You take a last look at the horizon, the fiery streaks of sunset reflecting off calm waters, and feel the quiet thrill of anticipation. Dinner aboard Titanic is more than a meal. It's a carefully orchestrated ritual, a performance of taste, etiquette, and refinement. As you move inside, the corridors carry the subtle hum of activity. The day's final light falls across polished floors and brass fittings, blending seamlessly with the soft glow of gas and electric lamps. You can feel the ship breathing with purpose, moving gracefully through the Atlantic. The quiet confidence, the interplay of labor and luxury, of human skill and oceanic vastness, settles into your consciousness. Being first class on Titanic is to live suspended between performance and leisure, awareness and distraction, awe and routine. The evening settles in fully now, and the scent of polished wood, faint perfume, and the Atlantic itself blends into a kind of understated elegance as you step onto the deck once more. Twilight softens the horizon, and the warm hues of sunset give way to cooler blues and silvers, reflecting off the gently rolling sea. You lean lightly against the railing, feeling the ship's subtle sway beneath your feet, and notice how the low light transforms familiar spaces into almost secretive corners, perfect for quiet conversation or stolen observation. A small group of passengers walks slowly along the promenade, their shadows stretching long and elegant across the deck. A gentleman straightens his jacket, offering a bow to a lady whose hat has been slightly ruffled by the evening breeze. You catch the delicate humor in the gesture and remind yourself that etiquette is a performance here, even when it seems instinctive. Historians still argue whether this careful adherence to formality enhanced enjoyment or added a layer of constant self-awareness. But right now, it feels like both. Near the forward deck, a pair of young men debate the evening's dinner menu, their voices subdued but animated. One insists the consomme will be perfect, while the other speculates about the flambe. It's the kind of trivial, elegant debate that first class life encourages, where small pleasures are elevated to ritual importance. You watch a lady adjust her lace gloves, and a thought strikes you only here, only in this precise combination of luxury, time, and ocean, would even minor decisions carry such weight. The promenade hums with quiet activity. Children, under the care of governesses, run in brief bursts of joy, squealing as they chase each other around deck chairs, while adults stroll in measured paces, observing and being observed. The contrasts are striking. Playful chaos balanced by refined calm. Youth juxtaposed against maturity. Leisure punctuated by the subtle orchestration of order. You note the quirky detail of a man carrying a mechanical birdcage, complete with a small singing bird, meant as entertainment and status. A tiny wonder amidst the expanse of the Atlantic. You pause near a deck chair, letting the wind ruffle your hair, and glance toward the horizon. The ocean stretches endlessly, calm and undisturbed, reflecting starlight that will soon dominate the sky. A distant foghorn sounds faintly, a reminder that the ship is not isolated, but navigating a vast, sometimes unpredictable expanse. The juxtaposition of control and vulnerability is palpable. While first-class passengers float in comfort and ritual, the ship itself remains dependent on human skill and fortune. Attention historians still debate regarding the perceived unsinkability of the Titanic. A steward glides past, offering chilled lemonade and small confections. You accept one, noting the artistry of its presentation. Delicate sugarwork, perfectly proportioned bite, nothing wasted. Every gesture from the crew feels rehearsed, yet natural. An invisible choreography that maintains the illusion of effortlessness. Even the act of taking refreshment feels like participation in a ritual that transcends mere nourishment. A group of passengers gathers around the ship's photographer, positioning themselves carefully to capture the fading light. The poses are subtle performances of grace, posture, and refinement, and you note the odd contrast. The photograph freezes a moment of controlled elegance, while the Atlantic continues to move imperceptibly beneath them. It's a reminder that life aboard the Titanic is both fleeting and orchestrated, beauty preserved in still frames while motion and labor hum quietly beneath. Finally, you wander aft, where the shadows are longest and the glow of deck lamps begins to highlight polished brushed brass and varnished wood. Couples lean against railings, speaking in gentle tones. A lone passenger sketches the scene before him. A child hides behind a governess's skirt, peeking at the waves. The ship moves steadily, the Atlantic stretching into infinity, and you feel an odd serenity, a sense of suspension in a world where ritual, luxury, and quiet labor intertwine seamlessly. You take it all in, aware that each moment is a carefully maintained balance between appearance and reality, leisure and labor, anticipation and experience. Night deepens, and the first-class decks take on a soft, almost dreamlike quality. The lamps are lit, their glow reflecting off brass and polished wood, creating gentle pools of light that punctuate the darkness. You walk slowly along the promenade, listening to the faint lapping of waves against the hull, a rhythm both calming and hypnotic. The Atlantic seems endless in this light, dark and silvered at once, carrying the ship forward in quiet, steady assurance. You can feel the subtle sway beneath your feet, a reminder of the powerful mechanics and skillful engineering holding this floating palace aloft. Passengers stroll in pairs and small groups, their shadows stretching long and flickering with every movement of the lamps. A couple leans together at the railing, murmuring in tones just loud enough for each other to hear. Nearby, a man sketches quickly in a notebook, capturing the subtle interplay of light and shadow, the reflective shimmer of the water, and the quiet beauty of first-class ritual unfolding around him. You realize that night on Titanic is another performance, more intimate and subtle than daytime spectacles. A blend of social grace, private reflection, and gentle observation. The faint strains of music reach your ears from the lounge, a piano's soft arpeggio drifting through open doors. The notes are delicate, almost invisible in the context of the night, yet they command attention, framing the elegance around you. Historians still argue whether such musical interludes were mere ornamentation or vital elements in sustaining the immersive environment of first-class life. In any case, you feel it the way sound, light, and motion converge to create a heightened sense of presence, a reminder that the ship is alive with both people and atmosphere. Children's laughter has diminished to whispers, replaced by the occasional shuffle of servants moving quietly through corridors, adjusting furniture, or delivering trays. The subtle choreography of service continues, even as passengers retreat toward staterooms for evening preparation. You notice a woman brushing a young girl's hair with practiced care, the small motions punctuated by whispered instructions. A quirky detail surfaces. Some passengers keep small personal stoves in their cabins for tea, or warming tiny delicacies. An odd yet fascinating glimpse into private indulgences hidden beneath formal luxury. You wander near the grand staircase, marveling at how shadows and lamplight transform the ornate woodwork. Every carved cherub, every polished banister, seems to take on new life in this softened glow. You pause to imagine how many footsteps have echoed here today, how many conversations unfolded in hushed tones, how every gesture, bow, or nod has been subtly observed. It is a floating microcosm of elegance, vigilance, and performance, and you, a quiet participant, are part of it. The wind carries whispers from the deck, fragments of conversation about upcoming dinners, theatre, and plans for arrival in New York. Gentle laughter punctuates the murmur, subtle and restrained. Couples stroll, arm in arm, exchanging remarks that are both sincere and performative. The first-class experience is clearly more than luxury. It is a sustained engagement with refinement, decorum, and the intricate social dance of Edwardian life. Historians still debate the psychological effects of such constant attention to manners and appearances. But you sense the blend of comfort, challenge, and subtle thrill in every measured step. As the night deepens, you lean on the railing and watch the horizon fade into darkness. The water stretches endlessly, reflecting the dim glow of lamps and occasional stars. A small group of men observes the waves, commenting quietly on the ship's wake and the behavior of the ocean. You feel a quiet camaraderie with these unknown observers, a shared awareness of the vastness beyond the ship and the fragility of life suspended above it. The Atlantic is calm, reassuring, yet vast, reminding you that luxury and precision exist within a world both beautiful and indifferent. Finally, you turn inward, toward the warmth of the corridors and the promise of a carefully orchestrated dinner. The scent of polished wood, faint perfume, and the sea accompanies you as you walk, a gentle reminder of the layered experiences that defined first-class life on Titanic. The night is alive with subtle motion, whispered conversations, and quiet ritual, a delicate balance of human presence and oceanic expanse. You take one last deep breath on the deck, feeling the sway, the breeze, and the serene pulse of this floating palace, aware that every moment is curated, precious, and fleeting. The late night hours settle over the Titanic like a velvet cloak. The promenade is almost deserted now, with only the occasional night wanderer or steward passing silently along polished decks. The lamps glow softly, casting pools of golden light that reflect in the dark water stretching endlessly beyond the railings. You take a slow walk, letting the gentle sway of the ship underfoot lull you into a rhythm both soothing and hypnotic. The Atlantic stretches infinitely in every direction, a silent, shimmering companion to your solitary journey through the orchestrated luxury of first-class life. You pause near the forward deck, leaning lightly against the railing, feeling the cool night air brush against your face. The occasional whisper of passengers talking quietly, the soft shuffle of servants, and the faint hum of engines below combine into a layered lullaby. It's intimate, comforting, and slightly uncanny, the perfect blend of human diligence and the ocean's immense calm. Historians still argue whether the meticulous routine of first-class life served as genuine leisure or subtle anxiety management. But tonight, you feel entirely present, absorbed in the cadence of this floating palace. A child's faint giggle echoes from the distance, quickly hushed by a governess, reminding you that life in miniature continues even at night. Nearby, a man sketches quietly in his notebook, capturing the interplay of lamplight and shadow, of polished wood and darkened sea. You smile at the persistence of curiosity and creativity. It thrives even amid strict social codes and precise etiquette. A quirky detail emerges in your mind. Some passengers keep small instruments or gadgets in their staterooms to amuse themselves during long hours, blending utility with whimsical indulgence, a tiny rebellion against routine. You wander toward the grand staircase once more, letting the intricate carvings and glass panels glow in lamplight. Every detail, every polished surface, every subtle shadow feels heightened in the quiet of night. The ship hums with invisible labor, stewards adjusting furniture, engineers monitoring machinery, wireless operators transmitting messages. Even in this serene setting, the magnitude of coordination beneath the surface is astonishing. The illusion of effortless luxury depends entirely on these unseen hands, and you can't help but marvel at their quiet, essential work. The soft sounds of distant conversation, the faint notes of piano drifting from the lounge, and the subtle creak of deck boards form a gentle soundtrack to the night. Passengers lean on railings, watch the horizon, and whisper about the upcoming day. You notice how time feels different here, elongated, cushioned, and suspended between motion and stillness. This is a world deliberately designed to make you feel both significant and protected, cocooned within elegance, ritual, and careful observation. As you walk, the Atlantic seems to stretch into infinity, vast yet calm, reflecting starlight like scattered diamonds. The ship's wake glimmers faintly behind, a silver ribbon trailing through darkness. You feel the deep serenity of being aboard, something meticulously balanced, powerful, and human-made. A structure simultaneously fragile and assured, carrying hundreds of souls with an unspoken promise of safety and refinement. Historians still debate whether passengers fully appreciated the engineering marvel beneath them, or whether it became invisible amidst the spectacle of comfort and ritual. For now, the presence of that balance is undeniable. Finally, you settle on a deck chair, letting the soft rocking of the Titanic ease you further into reflection. The night is vast, quiet, and intimate all at once. Your gaze drifts over the water, the polished brass, the glowing lamps, and the occasional flicker of a distant passenger's lantern. It is a perfect convergence of human craft, social grace, and the untamed majesty of the Atlantic. You inhale deeply, feeling the rhythm of the ship, the subtle coordination of unseen labor, and the quiet beauty of first-class existence at its most serene. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize that being aboard the Titanic, first class at night, suspended above an endless ocean, is to inhabit a world of meticulously curated wonder, a balance of comfort, observation, and gentle awe. You are both participant and witness, moving in harmony with hundreds of others, yet entirely alone in your own perception. The ocean whispers, the ship hums, and the night stretches onward, infinite and embracing,